know about you guys, but personally I have a very complex relationship with movie remakes. On one hand, they can be absolutely brilliant and expand on the original story in new and creative ways, sometimes even surpassing the original in terms of quality and popularity. But then on the other hand, we have some absolute stinkers that were clearly just made for money and no actual passion for the original story or wanting to tell it in a different way. But there are some remakes that I personally feel get far too much hate. And funnily enough, recently I've watched one and I was quite shocked to see all the hate for it online, because this might be one of my favourite remakes of all time. You've seen the thumbnail, you've seen the title, so you know this one's going to be a bit controversial because I don't think I've seen anyone else who's actually liked this. And of course, we're going to be talking about
the Toxic Avenger.
Hold on. No, that's the original.
The Toxic Avenger?
That's what the kids are calling him. I think it's swell.
Yeah. I actually like this one. But first, I think I want to talk about the original Toxic Avenger and the various spin-offs. Because this original film is a cult classic, and I can't talk about the remake without talking about the first one, because it may be dated, but God is it an iconic film.
You said you were gonna take me to see the David Bowie concert. He's not David Bowie.
The girl in this clip's supposed to be only 12 years old. And also a prostitute. The original Toxic Avenger was released in 1984 as a superhero black comedy. It was directed by Michael Hertz and Lloyd Kaufman, and was produced by Troma Entertainment. And while the film was not received well when it first released, it's now renowned as a cult classic and a staple in the black comedy splatterpunk slasher genre. While it had a tiny budget of only $500,000, during its first initial theatrical run, it made $800,000 to $2 million. While that may not be considered a lot, it really pulled in the money through VHS sales. Troma Entertainment said that by 1989, they'd pulled in over $15 million, and they used that $15 million to make 3 more Toxic Avenger movies, which I have not seen, but just look at some of these posters. But what actually is the Toxic Avenger about? Good question. It's about a janitor and pool cleaner called Melvin, who you could argue is depicted as someone with a disability, and is teased and made fun of by literally everyone while he's doing his job.
I'm gonna take this mop and shove it down your throat.
I want to do it with you.
Okay.
In fact, they all decide to pull a great big prank on him. He of course runs away, which leads to him falling out of a window and into a vat of toxic waste. And thus created the Toxic Avenger, a strong, powerful creature who would go around saving the innocents of Tromaville from all who seek to harm them. Toxie even finds love after saving a blind woman from some violent attackers. And I get that it was supposed to be funny, but these two are actually adorable together. But why is this movie renowned as a cult classic nowadays when it was hated upon release? Well, multiple reasons actually. It features some hilarious practical effects. And for some horror fans like myself, we bloody love practical effects. And while they may be incredibly dated, I think the silly practical effects work perfectly for this sort of film. And speaking of humour, another reason horror fans like this is because it's so ridiculous that it's hilarious. Toxie just shovels ice cream and whipped cream into this guy's face, and then turns a blender on in his mouth. Some parts I particularly didn't find funny were when they included a rape scene, but it was just played off as quite comedic. And also the scene I put at the beginning with the child prostitute. But these were included to be offensive. It is so obviously a product of its time. These scenes exist to offend the audience, because this is the sort of film it is. It exists to be offensive, stupid, and entertaining. And personally, I was entertained. It's one of those ridiculous 80s movies where it's just so ridiculous that it's good. And the general consensus for this film is they either loved it or they hated it. No in between. So I can understand why the die-hard fanbase was so upset when they eventually announced a reboot. But I'm gonna be the one to say it. This is one of my favourite remakes of all time. And I know that's a very unpopular opinion because the reviews for this film are very low. But I personally had so much fun with it that I just wanted to explain why I personally think it worked for me as a remake. And I must say this now, Just because it worked for me as a remake doesn't mean that it had to work for you as a remake. I can totally understand why people did not like this remake and were outraged when they heard Toxic Avenger was getting a remake. But I went into it knowing that other people hated it and that it was probably going to be bad, and was completely shocked that I found myself having so much fun with this film. So, what did they change about this film compared to the original? Firstly, Melvin is no longer Melvin. Melvin is Winston. And Winston is Peter Dinklage. Winston may still be a janitor, but he's not exactly working at a wellness centre anymore with a pool. He works in a massive factory for a wellness company, which produces lots of toxic waste. But the way that Winston gets infected with this toxic waste is a lot different than how Melvin got affected with it. Melvin fell out of a window because he was running away from a cruel prank. Winston got shot in the face by a group of nu metal rap assassins, who are quite literally named the Killer Nuts, who, fun fact, have a Spotify page where the 2 songs that they made for the movie were actually released on Spotify. And I'm not going to lie to you, I loved My Baby Is an Axe. It sounded even better in the film, but I genuinely have this song in my playlist. It's like if Limp Bizkit and Hollywood Undead had a baby, and I love it. I think the style of music that they chose for this film was genius, and it perfectly fits the sort of, like, the tone and the atmosphere of this film as just not taking itself very seriously. But yeah, I think the sort of early Hollywood Undead style of music they chose for this film was genius. I really liked it. But yeah, the situation in which the main character becomes Toxie in these 2 films is very different, because Winston gets shot in the head by these killer nuts, and then gets thrown into a river with his radioactive mop. And that's how he becomes the Toxic Avenger. Speaking of the Toxic Avenger, the designs are also very different. In the original film, Toxie keeps a more human appearance, with his skin tone being more of a charred grey, because of course he got covered in toxic waste which burnt his skin. But in the new film, Toxie is full on green, with some parts of skin just peeking out. It's really funny. Both designs of Toxie, in my opinion, are very funny, because the original Toxie, just look at this guy. What a distinguished gentleman. Whereas this Toxie looks more stereotypically toxic, with him being neon green. And I know some people were complaining about the new design of Toxie, but personally, I really like both. And some people were also complaining about the casting of Peter Dinklage, even commenting that they wonder if he stole this role from other small actors. I'm assuming they meant that he could have stole the role from other little people, because other little people who are also in the acting/entertainment industry have shared their intense dislike for Peter Dinklage, and I can see why they feel that way. The biggest example of this was Hornswoggle, who said that he did not like Peter Dinklage at all. And I'm gonna let him explain why.
Fuck you, Peter Dinklage. Piece of shit.
That's real heat, too.
Fucking hate him. He costed so many people in my community jobs with that Snow White bullshit. Pisses me off.
Don't you also hate Hugh Grant?
Why?
Didn't the Oompa Loompa thing? Isn't that a thing?
He did make a comment. That's not as bad. Fuck Peter Dinklage. Like, fuck, man, it pisses me off. It still makes me mad. Like, he costed so many people jobs. So many people.
Because he wanted to be the only dwarf.
You know what? I don't think that. I think he wanted to make a statement, and he thought he was making some cool, hip thing. But it wasn't. When he did Elf, that check cashed just fine. Tyrion Lannister was a role for a little person. He cashed that check for all those years. Like, I'm okay not going out for Brad Pitt's role. Give me Grumpy or Happy or Sleepy. In a major Disney remake?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on. And then you're going to have 7 dwarves, then their extras, then their stunt doubles that are all going to get paid. And he fucked it.
Well, I think you should be happy because that movie turned out, it was atrocious.
I heard it was dog shit.
Yep,
Okay.
atrocious. So it's all good.
Yeah, and I won't see it because I'm pissed off about it. I will not watch it. I love Disney.
Don't
I'm a
worry,
Disney
nobody
fanatic.
else is going to see it either.
Yo, I heard.
Now, what Hornswoggle is referring to here is when Peter Dinklage made a statement towards Disney when they announced the remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Peter Dinklage was upset that, while on one hand Disney was proudly casting a Latina to play Snow White, they also still used harmful stereotypes by still using dwarves. He makes it clear in this article that he is not a fan of the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and would have liked if Disney put a, quote, cool progressive spin on the fairy tale instead, because he is not a fan of the original story, which he advocated against having little people be put into these sorts of roles. Basically, in Peter Dinklage's opinion, he believes that actors with dwarfism should be allowed to just play any other role like any other actor, and he believes that people with dwarfism should not be confined to these, like, fantasy, stereotypical, quote, dwarf roles, and instead should just be incorporated into the story like any other person, which I personally think is a valid feeling for him to have as someone with dwarfism, feeling like he's confined to these fantasy roles. But other people with dwarfism feel like Peter Dinklage should not be the voice of people with dwarfism, and feel like the way he went about this whole Snow White fiasco was not very good. Hornswoggle said that because he went on this tirade against using little people in this role, he put many little people out of work. He feels that criticism like this made Disney go towards CGI instead of hiring other little people to play the dwarves, because unfortunately little people find it very hard to find themselves a place in Hollywood, because most roles for little people are these fantasy roles, are these dwarves. Because as cruel as that sounds, it's true. Little people usually do not get cast in films unless there's some sort of fantasy creature or some sort of comedic relief. And this is why lots of people with dwarfism blame Peter Dinklage for this. Because Disney could have given lots of actors with dwarfism their big break in Hollywood, and it could have boosted their careers so much. But they feel that because Peter Dinklage criticised this as someone with dwarfism, they pivoted more towards CGI. And while I still think it's valid for Peter Dinklage to feel the way he does about roles for people with dwarfism, the way he went about it, intentional or not, could have cost some actors with dwarfism finally getting their big break and finally getting a role in Hollywood. So yeah, the general consensus from other little people is he's taking roles away from them. That while he used to take on demeaning roles, he's now pulled this ladder out from under him, saying that people with dwarfism shouldn't take on these roles. Which is criticism of him that I can absolutely understand. I can only imagine how disheartening it is for actors with dwarfism to see that there's only one person in Hollywood with their condition that's getting roles. And while I can acknowledge that he's a really good actor, and that while I really enjoyed him in this movie as the role of Winston, and that while I appreciated an actually disabled person playing the role of the main character, because while he seems like a nice person and that this film was a product of his time, the actor for Melvin appears to not have a disability, because he absolutely does not talk like this in real life, and it seems to be that he was playing it up for comedic value, and that they did not hire a person with a mental disability for this role. And while some might say that Melvin is not intended to be, disabled, it's kind of clear from some of the stuff he does and the way he speaks that he isn't just a nerd, that the way he talks is very reminiscent of people who I've interacted with, especially, who are on the autism spectrum and have troubles with their speech. You could argue that Melvin's just supposed to be really stupid instead of being disabled, but the way he speaks leads me to believe that this character, unintentionally or not, comes across as someone with an intellectual disability.
Alright. There's one other little thing, Melvin.
So seeing them cast an actually disabled person to play this equivalent of Melvin was quite nice to see, and I do believe Peter Dinklage was really good in this role. I would have also loved to see this role go to a smaller actor who wasn't as already established as Peter Dinklage is. And while I think he did a fine job as Winston, I believe that picking a less established actor with the same condition would have been such a more impactful choice than picking the most famous disabled person they know, which is Peter Dinklage. But enough about Peter Dinklage. Why did I like this movie, and why do I think it's a successful remake? Well, for starters, I wouldn't exactly call this a remake. It's completely different to the original story, as in they've changed basically everything besides the main premise of someone falls into toxic waste and becomes the Toxic Avenger who becomes a local hero. But even then in the remake, they take this and run with it. There's a whole plot about Kevin Bacon, the head of this pharmaceutical wellness company, who injects gorilla blood into himself because apparently he's sick, who drinks Toxie's blood and turns into a sheep hybrid. Like the movie Black Sheep. It's so stupid. I loved it. And then Toxie and this guy have a final showdown type battle. It was so funny. It couldn't be further from the original in the best way possible. It's not a shot-for-shot remake like the new Disney Moana movie. It's completely different. It puts its own spin on a classic concept and changes it into something else while still keeping the core plot of Toxie. And it's brilliant. I think it works. It does incorporate some CGI into the effects, but I love them. I thought they were so perfectly silly, so perfectly gory, that they matched the tone of the movie so well. I thought the gore in this was brilliant, especially with the ending scene with the car. If you watched it, you know what I mean. I was pissing myself laughing. Speaking of laughing, I laughed a lot during this film. One of the main criticisms of this film was that the humour was far too on the nose and that it was constantly in your face at all times. And I can agree. But personally, I loved that, and I think that it did work most of the time. Most of the jokes landed for me, and I was having so much fun with it. Fundamentally, I think this film is just silly fun, and I loved it. The scene where Winston was getting his brain scans back and the doctor kept getting interrupted by the sort of noise outside, it was really funny. The faces that Winston was making were just so funny. But then in the very next scene, I was feeling heartbroken for Winston because he was on the phone to his insurance and they were telling him that his, quote, tier of insurance wouldn't cover the operation, which I thought was a very clever reference to, like, tiers and stuff, like how health is becoming subscription-based. There was an incredible Black Mirror episode about this, and that made me cry like a baby. But on the whole, I think this movie's humour worked for me personally. I can absolutely understand if it didn't work for you, but for me, it absolutely did work. I had so much fun with this. I didn't go in expecting anything special, and I was blown away at how much I was having fun. And I know I'm gonna get the obligatory, oh well, just because it's fun doesn't mean it's good. And I can understand that. I can understand if you did not think this film was good. If you watched it, and even if you had fun, you still thought, it was still a bad movie. That's understandable. I have some fun with some absolute stinkers of films sometimes, and I can still admit they're not very good, but I can also still see the value in them. However, in this film's case, I did think it was a good movie. I think it's amazing. And to me, it was amazing because it's everything I look for in a film. It was funny, it made me laugh, it made me feel sad directly after making me laugh. I loved the effects of this movie. The practical effects of the Toxie suit were phenomenal. The soundtrack was brilliant, and the Killer Nuts absolutely killed their performance. I really liked the wholesome ending. I know that was going to upset some people with how, like, cute and wholesome the ending was. The credits were adorable when Toxie was watching his son do his talent show. I thought that was adorable. I think all round the cast did a wonderful job. Jacob Tremblay did a brilliant job as Winston's son, and Taylor Page was a brilliant supporting actress, and I cannot stress enough how excited I am to eventually see I Love Boosters. It was written and directed by Macon Blair, who was also in The Green Room, which I think is a brilliant movie that you should watch, by the way. And while Peter Dinklage may have played Winston, the actual body of Toxie was played by Luisa Guerrero, who did a fantastic job. And personally, I didn't even notice the voice dubbing at all for Peter Dinklage over the body of Toxie being played by Luisa. I didn't even notice. So that wasn't really a problem for me. It might be for you, but personally I didn't find that to be an issue. Kevin Bacon was there, being Kevin Bacon. Oh, and Elijah Wood was there. Overall, I think the cast did a really good job. I just would have liked to see a lesser-known disabled actor be the lead for this movie. In my opinion, he did do a good job. I just would have liked to see this go to someone who wasn't as famous and give them a better shot at making it in Hollywood and giving them a check for once. I loved the humour, I loved the effects, I love how stupid it was, and I just feel like personally it did everything I wanted it to as an unserious film. And that's pretty much it. I know most people aren't going to agree with me on this one, but I found this film to be one of my favourite remakes of all time. I don't even know if I can call it a remake because it just takes such a different spin on the original premise that I don't even know if I can call it a remake. But overall, I loved it. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support my channel, I would really appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so I can at least attempt to monetize my content. That's my biggest goal from doing these videos. But if you also want to support in a different way, I have a Redbubble shop where I make horror designs from horror media, and I also have commissions open. You can find my reference sheet on Instagram. I will draw for literal pennies, and I am not joking. So drop me a follow on there and send me a message. I have my message requests turned on to followers only, because I've been getting some nasty DMs after my Melanie Martinez reviews. Safe to say, I'm never doing that again. I've learnt my lesson. And that's about it for me. Goodbye.